Yeah. We're in Florian's camper, and I'm gonna interview you because you're a journalist. And could you tell us how you became a journalist?
Yeah, it's very strange for me to be on the other side because usually I'm asking the questions. But I knew that I wanted to become a journalist already in grade 5, and then I sort of continued this path or worked toward this goal since I'm basically 10 or 11 years old. I tried to get into a journalism degree at university, but at the first time it didn't work. I didn't get accepted, so I went to Australia to live there for 1.5 years. But I also worked as a like a hobby journalist there, and then I ended up starting to study journalism in London, but I didn't last there very long because of various reasons. And then in the end, I studied English language and literature in Germany and in Wales. And afterwards, I did an apprenticeship at a photography magazine in Hamburg. And since 2016, I'm basically working freelance, but I have been working for different small newspapers all along the way since I'm 17.
So what's like the number one? If you could talk to yourself from 17, how would you then like think it's the best way and it's the most efficient way to do it?
I think efficiency isn't the, of at least for me, isn't the most important thing, but persistence. In the end, getting a foothold in journalism is or can be very difficult because everybody can be a journalist, and there's so many journalists out there in the media industry. The money you can earn is getting less and less and less. So you have to become a businessman, really. I teach journalism, well, not journalism, but how to be a good freelancer, successful freelancer to journalism students. And when I tell them, or when they ask me what the most important thing is, that writing stories is maybe 10% of my job. The rest is being a company, really, doing lots of other stuff.
So you've been through a lot of challenges, basically, because you wanted it, but you didn't get in,
Yeah.
and then you got something else, and then you figured out, okay, actually I should learn a whole lot of other skills to become a journalist, but you were very motivated to do it. So what is it that you're so certain about what you do?
I'm 100% convinced that I've got the best job in the world because I get paid most of the time. I get paid to ask questions, to be curious, to meet different people. Through my work, I've seen the most extraordinary countries and people and situations. I've been in situations and places where most other people have never been and will never be, and I get paid to do this. And I feel very privileged with the job that I have. It's a lot of hard work, but I get a lot out of it. And even though there were hardships in the beginning, I wrote so many applications for an apprenticeship. I wrote so many applications for university degrees, and I got rejected so many times, but I just kept working because, especially getting started in the job, it's only like the start is the most not important but the most challenging bit, I think, because nobody's waiting for you in the industry. So you have to try and figure out a way to, you know, get your name out there and mostly get your stories out there. And there are magazines I've pitched or I've suggested 20 plus ideas and they never accepted them, but I will, because I really want to work for those magazines, I will just keep trying until I succeed.
Were you always that persistent, or did you really have to learn some new things inside of yourself to be able to pursue?
In terms of the job, like being a journalist and affording this kind of lifestyle that I've got now, I've always been that persistent because I love what I do. So this has really been fairly easy, or maybe not easy, but I didn't have to learn it. It just comes naturally. Sometimes being a journalist and loving my job is not so good, actually, because I tend to work too much because I've got constantly ideas for new stories, and taking time off work is actually quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But um, because I always knew what kind of career path and life path I wanted, I didn't have to, try and figure out a way how to do it.
So were there like challenges you met along the way and things you really needed to let go or to change inside of yourself to be able to come further with it? Like what's the most important lessons you've learned?
Yeah, I think not taking rejection personally is a big thing, because for many editors, for many people that I work for many clients, they get, so many emails a day, and initially I was much more focused on, my story idea is bad, my email is bad, my timing is bad, but there can be so many different reasons why people don't get back to you, and 99.9% of the time it's got nothing to do with you. It can be bad timing, it can be that, he's in a conference that they, I don't know, don't have the budget at the moment, that they've had a similar story recently, and when they do get back, that's also something I've learned. When I do get a rejection via email or phone, I always try to turn this rejection into a new opportunity by asking the editors, why didn't you accept the idea? What can I improve for the next time? Which topics are you looking for? So even if I get rejected, I try to make it into a new opportunity.
Cool. Can you remember what made you change that way of looking at it?
Talking to very many other journalists and other freelancers. Yeah. And one of them told me to, to basically not take things personally. Also, sometimes, when I send in the manuscript and the editor looks at it, and sometimes the editing of them, they don't like anything, and they, crisscross through your whole manuscript, and it looks like you've never written a text before. It is hard, but in the end it will make things better. And also some very good advice, which I think applies to many freelancers, was given to me by my former boss before I started working freelance full time. He said that you should always try and evaluate the jobs and the tasks that you do based on a concept called the 3 Fs. It's fun, fame, and fortune. And if you can, if you have 2 of those completed, if you can tick 2 of those boxes, it's either fun or fame, or fun and fortune, or then you should take the job. If it's all 3, perfect. If it's only 1, let it go.
Cool. So you took a lot of advice from different people, and then it went easier? Then it was.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it went easier, but I think I didn't pay as much attention to the setbacks anymore. And also, now that I've been in the industry for, freelancing full time for 5 or 6 years now, I did get commissions by very, very big magazines all over the world, and that also, having those on my resume also helps, opening other doors as well.
Yeah, that's nice. Once the boat gets going. Yeah. So if things aren't going the way you imagine it, are there things you do to stay enthusiastic and motivated and just to try again? Like, are there things that get you out of bed every morning?
Well, chocolate.
Yeah. So you eat a lot of chocolate
yeah,
when you get rejections.
Yeah, sometimes. It also helps me concentrated at work, but today is actually the last day of chocolate for the next 3 months. So I will try to, reduce my...
The last day of chocolate, so...
Yes, but let's see how mentally stable I am in 3 months. But I do a lot of exercise, sports. Here in Portugal, I surf. I don't like running, but I walk my dog. I go freediving. I go stand-up paddleboarding. I go longboarding. I go slacklining. Just be outside in nature helps a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. And eat a lot of chocolate.
Yeah, I mean, the more you exercise, the more chocolate you can eat. So.
Alright. So what was that with today's my last chocolate day? What's a chocolate day?
No, it's
curious.
Every year I'm fasting on chocolate because I don't drink alcohol, I don't eat meat, so that those 2 they don't really make sense for me to be fasting. So because I eat quite a lot of chocolate,
right,
I will go without chocolate, and I've decided this morning that from today onwards for the next 3 months there's no chocolate.
Wow.
Well, no, today's January.
3 months.
Yeah.
My God.
Well, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, today is the last day because tomorrow is the 1st of February. I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
March,
We'll see.
April.
I mean,
so the 1st of May you can eat chocolate again.
yeah, don't tell me, but I'm afraid. Yeah.
So did you eat a lot of chocolate because you had a lot of work to do?
Yeah.
Like lots of interviews.
Yeah. Especially at least that's what I believe, that chocolate helps me concentrate while writing, because the writing, even though every journalist says, oh, I love writing text, it's actually the second worst part of my job. It's agony every single time for a long text. There's a lot of procrastination involved, a lot of cleaning my van, a lot of doing stuff that I don't really need to do just in order to not write the text. And obviously also when I sit down, then there's also the chocolate involved.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I get that when I do computer stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the coolest thing? Like what's the coolest thing you experienced on your many things?
Yeah,
Pick some.
I can go on for that about that for 2 hours. Maybe I can give you a few keywords and then you think which sounds most crazy. I went on a hitchhiking race from Germany to Transylvania. I went on a luxury safari in Botswana. I went gold digging in Switzerland. I went to see the most remote inhabited island of the United Kingdom. Yeah, and many, many, many other things.
Tell us about gold digging in Switzerland.
Yeah, friends of a friend of mine, he's a photographer. Those friends, they have been into gold digging, like just as a hobby, for a couple of years, and I didn't know that, but gold digging as a hobby is quite popular within Germany, because you go into lots of rivers and then you don't find much, but it's just about the quest itself. And so we pitched the story to a magazine, and then they said, well, no, it's not really popular, or it's too popular, so it's not news anymore. But then we suggested to them that we're going to Switzerland, because that's where all the gold that you find in Germany is coming from. So the chances of finding gold in Switzerland are much higher.
Is there a lot of gold in Switzerland?
Yeah, I mean, most of it comes from the Alps in this region. So we went into a river. It was in the middle of summer, scorching hot. There were 3 guys, and we had shovels, and we had buckets, and we had those pans, and then it was 3 days of non-stop digging up huge stones from the riverbed. The river was freezing, but in the end we found, well, I think 1.1 grams of gold.
And this is more a hobby thing in Switzerland. So what kind of people are gold diggers?
It's just people who want to be outside and do a bit of exercise. And I found it quite strange, because when I did the like the previous research for the story to get prepared into the job, obviously you read about San Francisco and the gold rush, and then the gold rush in America, and it's fascinating to see how easy you get drawn into the gold rush feeling yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think we started early. We left Germany on Friday, and then had our first gold digging session Friday afternoon, and then by lunchtime on Sunday we were about to leave, because we had done everything for the story and we were exhausted. And then as it was time to pack up everything, we said, let's try here again, and 10 more minutes, and then we found a little nugget, like not a nugget, but like a little piece of gold, and then you get excited, and you do one more here and one more there and one more there, and all of a sudden it's 3 hours later, and you don't realize how the time passes.
That sounds nice.
It was fantastic, and we split up the gold between the 5 of us, and I've still got it on my shelf in Germany.
Nice. Yeah. Nice, yeah. And so what was the thing you personally liked the most? Can you...
About what?
One of your writer adventures.
I think I wouldn't tie it to a specific story, but I would just tie it to the job itself. To get to see and experience so many places, and also to get or to feel the trust that other people put in you. I've done stories where, you know, people have talked to me about sexual abuse they've experienced. They had never told this to anyone before, but they open up towards an interview with me or about suicide. And to be able to have such a strong connection in some of those stories is very humbling and also very fulfilling. I mean, I do stories where it, you know, I wouldn't say which belong into the entertainment business, but you know, I do stories about them, or I did stories about, you know, the hitchhiking race I told you about. There's no deeper meaning to it, but once you've got stories which really dig into the personality and into the history of someone, I'm preparing 2 kinds of those stories now here in Portugal as well. And this is also one of the challenging bits to let the person know that, you know, you're not just one of those journalists, but you really care for the story, and you know, you want to try to verify everything and hear both sides, and you know, because journalism has had some bad press lately. Sometimes it's sometimes I would say it's justified, and sometimes it's not.
But is it you who makes up the stories? Like you come with an idea, and then you think, I'm gonna do this, or are you being asked to do some stories? Like, for example, the abuse, was it you who thought, I really want to write a story about this subject? How does that go?
Generally speaking, I develop my own story ideas, which on the one hand is fantastic because I get to work on the stories that I really want to work on. On the other hand, it means it's much more work, because I have to come up with ideas constantly. Sometimes editors suggest stories to me. Also here in Portugal, there are 2-3 stories which have been assigned to me. And the story with the abuse, this was like, you call it a side story. I was to do a reportage in Botswana on a luxury safari, but I had to pay for the safari myself, and the money I got from the reportage was so little. I told the editors, you know, I have to do side stories which I find on the way and then be able to publish it. And one of the participants of the safari was a German movie director, a fairly famous one. And I shared a tent with him, and I got in touch with him before we left and said, oh, you know, there's this magazine in Germany, and we can do an interview for them. It's good for you, it's good for me. But the abuse was never an issue, because initially the topic was to be, I think his family, they've had the second or even first, I don't know, adoption case in the whole of Germany. Back in the 60s, and so he got a new sister from one day to the other, and they struggled a lot, and was to be about this history. But because we were in such a unique environment in the middle of the desert, you know, there were no phones working, so everybody really connected very deeply, and we had conversations on levels that you don't normally have. All of a sudden, I mean, it was like a 3-part interview because it was so intense, but all of a sudden he told me that, you know, he didn't experience abuse himself, but he was, you know, he witnessed abuse to the people, you know, the boys being in school next to him, and we had not planned this, but it was very humbling, and I'm still friends with him today. So
beautiful. And he was okay with you to publish it?
It was a very difficult process of, you know, verifying and fact-checking and editing, because usually what happens is I send in a manuscript, then the editors check things and, you know, make changes. But here I had to convince the editors that they cannot make any changes because the wording is so important. So it was a very close, you know, back and forth between me and the protagonist before we submitted the manuscript, but then everybody was fine with it.
That's nice. How does it usually go that you come up with stories? It just plops in your head? Or?
Usually I stumble across them, you know, I can read something and there's, you know, like at the end of one sentence, or like a byline of one sentence speaks about this unique job or this unique island that is only being that can only be done, I don't know, in this remote part of Scotland or whatever. And if it does something to me, if I feel triggered in one way or the other, I try to pursue it. Sometimes also, because I travel a lot, I've been living in this motorhome here for about a year and a half now, working from the road. And sometimes I also try to look for stories specifically where I want to go.
So you're just like, what shall I do next?
Yeah, oh well.
Let's write the story.
Yeah, I mean, usually the way it works is, I know that I'm in Portugal and I try to, I've got a big network of magazines, and then I try to, find stories. Last week I did a story on a dog breeder. He's breeding, or he's one of the most experienced breeders of the Portuguese water dog, which is a very unique and famous breed. And so I did a story for a Portuguese dog, a German dog magazine, and then I will be doing stories on a nature reserve in Portugal and on a seahorse investigative science story for German magazine. So
nice. Yeah. What was it that you tried to investigate that blew your mind? Like you wanted a certain outcome, or you do some research, right? So something you really didn't know before you started it, and then afterwards you thought, wow, that's interesting.
that happens with every story, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, I start with a certain idea, and because I mainly do science journalism, because first of all I find it very rewarding, because the scientists, they're usually so grateful and so thankful if you just let them talk and go prepared into an interview and just show interest in their work, because science communication, they do so much important and interesting stuff, but they just can't communicate, and having someone who's translating their work into the normal language is usually also very good for them. And usually whenever I go into researching a story, I've got more questions afterwards than I do have before.
Mm-hmm.
And on most topics I could write, well, not a book, but a whole magazine just about one story, but nobody's gonna pay me for that. So
yeah, and it's nice to do then different things
and oftentimes you just have one story leading to the other. The story about like a suicidal kind of story got proposed to me via a contact I had about, I did a story on political science stuff in Germany, and one of the advisors to one of the protagonists, he liked the story I did, and he said, oh, I know this person, he's been struggling with suicide because of some maldoing of the German government, regulation stuff. And so sometimes one story leads to the other, which is also nice.
Yeah. So for people who also want to follow their heart and pursue their dreams, what are your tips?
Yeah, as I said earlier, don't take rejection personally. Have a plan B, and also maybe to how do I put it best? If you want to follow your dreams, don't leave everything behind in the very beginning. So for some people that can work, because it makes you commit to something. But freelance journalism, I know a lot of people who struggle with freelance journalism because the industry, the money you get, you have to do more work to earn the same amount of money, and it's very stressful, and you're at the bottom of the food chain. But I got started into freelance journalism when I still had the security and the safety of I worked part-time with a news company basically. And if you want to follow your heart and you know that it's going to take a long time, get yourself into a position where you have maybe stable income, a stable surrounding, and don't put everything behind you from one moment to the next, and then you have to struggle to just find your bearings and find your balance in the beginning.
Yeah, wise words. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where can people find your work?
Basically on my website. It's I don't know, do you have show notes? Okay, maybe. I mean, I can.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
I
if
have to
it's
figure that
yeah,
out.
but if they Google my name, Florian Sturm, and then journalist, that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Because what's the name of your website?
It's called Florian-Sturm. .com, I think. Yeah. So
Okay.
Florian
Florian.
minus Sturm.com.
Ja, en Sturm is in het Duits. Sturm.
Yeah. You know my
Yes.
website better than I do.
I had your card. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very inspiring. I liked
Thank
the
you.
conversation. Thanks.
You're welcome.